Hey guys, tonight we drift across the surface of the world, not as a jet-setting traveler or a high-stakes explorer, but as a sleepy cartographer of the strange, the forgotten, and the gently confusing. You, refloating through oceans and over landscapes that defy the logic of your grade school geography class, guided by maps that no longer match the real world. We restarting our dreamy descent with a landmass that technically never existed. You reapproaching it now, this place that has been drawn and redrawn by cautious, quill-wielding hands across centuries of atlases. It's late evening in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the sky above turning an inky purple, and your tiny boat bobs along soft, rhythmic swells. You check the map, it says you should be here, but you look up, and nothing. This is Sandy Island, or I'll disable, a ghost of geography. First documented by whalers and traders in the 19th century, the island appeared on numerous reputable maps, including ones published by the British Admiralty and National Geographic. But when a group of Australian scientists sailed through its reported location in 2012, they found open sea. Not a reef, not a shoal, just water, sparkling, empty, and frankly, kind of smug about it. You lean over the edge of your imaginary boat. The ocean below is deep and calm. Historians still argue whether Sandy Island was a cartographic mistake, a mirage, or an elaborate prank passed down through generations of seafarers. Maybe some 19th century sailor was just bored and thought, what if I invented a whole island? I mean, who among us hasn't added a fake location just to mess with someone? But for decades, this phantom island was very real to navigators. Ships charted their courses around it. Pilots marked it on their flight paths. Somewhere, someone probably cancelled a honeymoon because of it. What's fascinating is that no one bothered to double-check for over 100 years. People trusted the maps, the books, the elegant hand-lettered atlases, gathering dust in university basements. Even satellite imagery missed it, perhaps because no one thought to ask. It was the kind of collective oversight that feels perfectly designed to lull you to sleep. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine being the sailor who finds nothing. Not danger, not mystery, just a very quiet, very wet disappointment. There's something poetic about that. Sandy Island reminds us that geography, often thought of as fixed and coldly precise, is surprisingly fluid. It breathes with human error, assumptions, and occasionally, a touch of mischief. As your boat glides through this blank patch of ocean, a pelican lazily flaps overhead, uninterested in your existential cartographic crisis. You recline. The night air is cool. You wonder how many other islands have been born, not of lava or tectonics, but of boredom and guesswork. And then, gently, your mind starts to wander. Did you know that phantom islands weren't that uncommon? There's a whole genre of them. The island of St. Brendan, Hybris, even Antilia, each appearing and vanishing across various centuries. Some were said to rise from the mist only once every 7 years. Others were just slight miscalculations exaggerated into legend. These floating myths were useful. Sailors could claim discovery without actually landing anywhere. Monarchs could add dots to their imperial maps. And best of all, no one could prove them wrong until long after they were dead. Your imaginary boat drifts past where Sandy Island should be. There's nothing but the creaking of wood, the distant splash of a fish, and the low hum of your mind getting ready to rest. Maybe it is nice that some parts of the world refused to be discovered. In fact, a French map from the 1900s included Sandy Island in precise detail. It had a shape, coordinates, even an elevation. One later theory suggested it was based on a reef that just happened to bubble up during low tide centuries ago. Or maybe it was floating pumice from a volcanic eruption that tricked early sailors into seeing land. But even that is speculation. You begin to imagine an island that only exists when you're almost asleep, visible only to those on the edge of dreaming. Maybe not in the Pacific at all, but in your own personal version of cartographic twilight, where facts fade into fiction and coordinates lead to stories. The stars overhead shimmer a little brighter. You trace one with your finger, letting it guide you toward the next chapter of tonight's strange, sleepy voyage. You wake, or perhaps you never quite fell asleep, somewhere in the heart of Africa. Not in a bustling capital or beside a roaring waterfall, but on an empty dirt road so straight, so unnaturally straight, that it could have been drawn with a ruler across the earth itself. You're standing on a borderline. Not just metaphorically. One foot is in Chad, the other in Sudan. Or maybe it's Mali and Algeria, or Libya and Niger. Honestly, it's hard to tell without a GPS. But that's kind of the point. As the dusty wind drifts past your ears, you begin to notice the uncanny precision of your surroundings. The border stretches for hundreds of kilometers, with no regard for rivers, mountains, or people. Villages are cut in half. Nomadic herders cross international boundaries daily without even knowing it. Even the goats seem confused. This is the legacy of the Berlin Conference of 1884-85, a gathering of European powers who divvied up the African continent like a pizza. No Africans were invited. Naturally, that would be complicated things. Instead, colonial representatives drew lines on maps from thousands of miles away, carving territories with names like British East Africa or French West Africa, most of which didn't reflect the actual ethnic, linguistic, or cultural geography on the ground. You walk slowly alongside one of these invisible walls, the sand crunching softly beneath your feet. It's warm, dry, and eerily quiet. There's no fence, no sign, just a line that might be been based on a parallel, a meridian, or someone's after-lunch doodle. Historians still argue whether the straight lines were meant to reduce conflict between colonial powers or simply expedite the process of slicing up an entire continent. The practical outcome, though, was decades, sometimes centuries of tension between communities suddenly labeled as belonging to different countries. Imagine if someone drew a line through your neighborhood and told you that your cousin's house was now in Belgian Congo, while yours was part of German East Africa. Thanksgiving would get very awkward. You wander into a tiny settlement that lies directly on the border. Half the huts fall in one country, half in another. Kids play soccer using a border marker as one goalpost. In the local language, there's not even a word for the foreign country name imposed by colonial mapmakers. It's a weird form of geographical absurdity how these artificial lines created real divisions. Even today, many African nations retain those old colonial borders because changing them might lead to even more disputes. You sip from a clay jug handed to you by a grinning grandmother who doesn't care which side of the line you standing. Onto her, the border is an imaginary idea like bedtime or daylight savings. And there's a certain dreamlike charm in that idea, that so many of the lines we accept as gospel on maps are, in fact, arbitrary, built not on terrain or consensus, but on convenience, misunderstanding, and imperial efficiency. You lie down under the shade of a lone acacia tree, feeling the stillness around you. Your fingers trace the outline of a faded map you brought along, the kind you'd find folded in a school geography book from 1972. The border lines are still sharp, etched like scars. One quirky tidbit you overheard in a dusty museum back in Nairobi. Some borders were drawn in places that had never been visited. That's right, entire regions were sectioned off by European officials who had never set foot in Africa. They just looked at rivers and mountains on maps and made decisions like, let us give this bend to Portugal. You can't help but chuckle, a soft breath of amusement lost in the breeze. As the sun sinks lower, casting long shadows across both sides of this straight line, you start to imagine what it might be felt like to live here before the border came. A place where people moved with the seasons, where trade flowed with the rhythm of language and kinship, not passports and checkpoints. There is something wonderfully lulling about it all. The silence, the endless straightness, the fact that the ground doesn't know it is divided. It just is. And that is geography, in a sleepy nutshell, equal parts terrain and story, reality and fiction. A small lizard darts past you, unaware that it has just crossed an international boundary. It stops, flicks its tail, and disappears into a bush. You stretch out your legs and listen to the gentle hum of insects and wind. There is a kind of peace here, even if the lines don't make sense. Maybe because they don't make sense. And as your eyes flutter shut for a moment, you think, if borders can be this arbitrary, maybe so can your worries. Just lines in the sand, waiting to be blown away by the next breeze. Now you re-standing very slowly. Mind you, no rush at a crossroads in Central Europe, where one little town has, over the past few centuries, belonged to more nations than you. We had cups of tea today. Welcome to the sleepy, map-worn village of Gwobchais, or is it Liabshuts? Or maybe it is just Tuesday, and the signs haven't been updated yet. Nestled near the shifting borders of Poland, Czechia, and what used to be Prussia, this quiet town has lived many political lives without ever picking up its feet. It hasn't marched into history. History has sort of shuffled past and dumped luggage. On the porch, you walk down cobbled streets where Gothic spires sit next to communist-era flats, and bakeries offer both sauerkraut-filled dumplings and pierogi, depending on who last ruled this patch of land. The buildings here don't really care who is in charge. They're more interested in keeping out the draft and supporting climbing ivy. Once part of the Kingdom of Bohemia, then absorbed into Habsburg Austria, later shuffled into Prussia, tossed into the German Empire, rebranded under Nazi Germany, redrawn into Poland post-World War II. This one little dot on the map has had a truly exhausting identity crisis. And yet, the people still bake bread, raise cats, and argue politely over garden fences. Historians still argue whether this constant change caused cultural blending or confusion. Local folk songs sound German but end in Polish. The Sunday markets sell Czech-style cheeses wrapped in Polish labels, and nobody is quite sure which saint the church bells are technically ringing for. You duck into a centuries-old in that S changed names with every regime, once Zur Goldenen Gans, then you, Zlate Husi, now just Golden Goose Barcalf with fairy lights out front. You order something local, though the menu lists dishes in 3 languages. The waiter, in a voice so soft it may have been whispering from another timeline, tells you the goulash recipe hasn't changed since 1789. You sip slowly. The stew is excellent. There is a comforting absurdity in all this. This is a place where people learned, generations ago, to stop rewriting their family histories every time the borders changed. Great-grandma didn't move, the countries did, simply lived in elsewhere, depending on which map you checked that year. One of the quirkier facts you come Across, in a sleepy library tucked between City Hall and a flower stall, is that, at least once, two different national governments tried collecting taxes from the same residents in the same year. Neither side backed down, and the villagers paid. Both then issued their own mock Gwabchais passports in protest, a joke that stuck for decades. As you wander out into the low afternoon light, you notice small plaques on houses. Not commemorating famous battles or revolutions, no, just names of former inhabitants in multiple languages. Johann, Jan, Ivan, all written in the same careful font. The road turns gravelly as you pass a field where locals are tending to rows of cabbages. You overhear them switching between tongues like it's no big deal. A joke in Czech, a shrug in German, a punchline in Polish. Borders, after all, are usually felt less on land than on paper. There is a windmill in the distance. It's crooked, as if it's just as tired of bureaucracy as everyone else. You reach it slowly, letting the crunch of each step sink into the soft rhythm of the evening. You pause there, letting the breeze brush against your cheeks, and look back at the little town that's been claimed and renamed more times than most countries change their flags. Yet, despite all the switches in sovereignty, nobody seems panicked. No sirens, no breaking news banners, just life continuing very calmly, and with good pastry. And that's something geography rarely tells you in textbooks. The places that get caught in the shuffle are often the ones that learn the most patience, the most humor, the most resilience, gently folded into everyday life. A donkey cart ambles by, the driver whistling an old tune that probably existed before any modern border. Diddy waves lazily at you, the universal language of, "Hey, stranger, it's all okay." You wave back, then lie down on the cool grass beside the windmill, breathing in the scent of tilled earth and late summer hay. In the sky above, the clouds drift over invisible lines that no bird has ever noticed. Your journey continues as you rise from the grassy patch beneath the old windmill and follow a meandering dirt road southward, though honestly, cardinal directions start to feel irrelevant out here. The sky stretches wide and low, the kind of sky that makes you forget whether it's morning or dusk. You're headed toward a river now, not a mighty, crashing one, with fame and songs written about it, but a sleepy, oddly behaved body of water with a peculiar trick up its sleeve. You arrive at the banks of the Amazon River, but not the one you think you know. This is the Rio Hamza, a shadow river, a ghost sibling, flowing nearly 4 kilometers underground, parallel to the Amazon itself. It's a strange, subterranean twin that was only confirmed to exist in the early 2010s. You can see it, you can swim in it, but beneath your feet, it flows just as stubbornly as any above-ground waterway. You pause and imagine an invisible river, 10 times wider than the Thames, gliding under ancient rock and root systems at the pace of a sluggish dream. It's so deep that even its discovery felt accidental. Researchers studying thermal oil wells simply noticed, "Hey, what's that gurgling noise?" Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations somehow sensed the presence of this hidden river, guiding settlement and trade routes in ways we've never fully understood. After all, when the land feels softer, or crops mysteriously flourish in one spot but not another, humans tend to build stories around it, sometimes literally. Standing on the jungle edge, you lean against a kapok tree. Its roots, massive and finger-like, appear to reach down into the earth, as if trying to sip from the Rio Hamza itself. Somewhere in the dense green behind you, a howler monkey releases a drawn-out yawn that sounds remarkably like someone just realizing it's Monday. And here's the quirky twist. parts of the Amazon region experience something even stranger: rivers that reverse their flow, if only for a while. During the rainy season, the Amazon swells so massively that it pushes water upstream into its tributaries. You're walking by one such river, the Rio Negro, and it's currently doing a very slow, very reluctant moonwalk backward. You crouch at the edge, touch the water, and wonder, if a river can change direction on a whim, why are humans so obsessed with rigidity? Back in a nearby village, let us call it Barcelos, a sleepy riverside town, you sit under a woven palm awning, sipping a cup of thick local coffee that tastes faintly like burnt sugar and something green you can name. The locals barely blink at the idea of a backwards flowing river. It does what it wants, one old man says, shrugging in a hammock, kind of like my cousin S-goat. The goat in question bleats as if on cue. Nearby, children play on a floating dock that bobs like a lazy elevator. Their games involve guessing which direction the water is moving today. Their mother, cutting cassava nearby, doesn't interfere. She has seen this flow reversal every year since she was their size. For her, it's as normal as rain. The river reflects everything now: sun, clouds, trees, even your wandering thoughts. It flows forward or backward. It's hard to tell. Maybe it just circles back on itself when no one's watching, curling into its own daydream like a cat. You begin walking again, letting the moist, fragrant air cling to your skin. There's something oddly comforting about a river that won't stay put. It makes geography feel alive, like a petulant artist refusing to follow the lines you gave them. A gentle drizzle begins, not enough to drench, just enough to encourage the scent of damp earth and crushed citrus leaves. A sloth, looking especially philosophical, blinks down at you from the canopy like it's been waiting centuries to witness this exact rainfall. And then you remember something else. In 2006, parts of the Amazon basin were found to have massive, ancient geoglyphs, huge earthen shapes and patterns carved into the land, completely hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth. Only when deforestation accidentally exposed them did researchers realize how little we actually know about the people who lived here long before the Spanish, long before cartographers even dreamed of naming this place. Some scholars think those geoglyphs were ceremonial. Others argue they were agricultural markers. One bold theory suggests they mapped the stars, but they all agree on one thing. The forest has been whispering secrets under its breath for a very long time. You stop walking, lean on a log, and listen. Somewhere beneath the moss and damp leaves, the Rio Hamza continues its quiet, unseen march, flowing so slowly that it takes thousands of years to reach the sea. And maybe that's the ultimate metaphor for this place, not a land that rushes, but one that waits, that turns back when necessary, that does things in its own time. Above you, the trees sway with a rhythm that's older than language. Behind you, the river chooses a direction, any direction. And you, standing in the middle of it all, begin to feel a little like that water, free to pause, change course, and drift a bit before moving forward again. You leave the echoing hush of the rainforest behind, the taste of damp wood and earth still lingering in your senses. Now, your path leads toward the sea, but not just any sea. You're heading to a place where cartographers once whispered in frustration, and ships sometimes sailed in circles. Tonight, you're visiting a place that technically doesn't exist, the phantom island of Bermea. As the terrain gradually flattens and the air thickens with ocean salt, you picture the scene centuries ago. Spanish sailors cruising the Gulf of Mexico, eyes squinting against the sun. There, Just north of the Yucatan Peninsula sits a small, reddish island. It appears on maps dating back to the 16th century. It's called Bermea, named for its ruddy soil, they say. It's right there, just floating casually in the middle of the sea. Except it's not anymore. You stroll along a modern shoreline in Mexico, the sand squeaking softly under your feet. Locals here have their own theories about Bermea. Some say the sea swallowed it. Others mutter about underwater volcanoes or CIA conspiracies. One elderly fisherman insists it sunk overnight in the 1990s because someone tried to drill oil too close. Historians still argue whether Bermea ever existed at all, or if it was a convenient myth. Cartographic gossip passed from one sailor's shaky hand to another's ink-stained parchment. You sit on a bench by a quiet marina in Progreso, watching boats bob like sleepy sea creatures. The Gulf stretches out before you, blue-gray and blank. Somewhere out there, supposedly, is where Bermea used to be. Satellite scans show nothing. Submarine surveys, also nothing. But curiously, it kept showing up on official maps well into the 20th century. It wasn't until 1997, yes, 1997, that Mexico finally had to admit, hey, maybe we should stop claiming this in oil negotiations. That's right. This missing island caused real diplomatic debates over maritime boundaries and oil rights. A place that may have never existed shaped international relations. You re-standing on land made slightly richer or poorer based on the ghost of a maybe. Sleepy geography just got a little passive-aggressive. You walk along the water, eyeing the horizon. It is empty. A single pelican flies overhead, then stops to float on an invisible current like it's got all the time in the world. If Bermea is down there somewhere, it's keeping to itself. But Phantom Islands aren't just a Gulf of Mexico thing. You pass a wooden sign explaining how dozens of vanishing islands have peppered nautical charts for centuries. Sandy Island near Australia, Thule in the North Atlantic, Hy-Brasil off the coast of Ireland. They show up, get sailors excited, then vanish, poof. Sometimes it was just a misreading of a fog bank. Other times, volcanic ash floating on water. Occasionally, just a prank by a bored cartographer who wanted to mess with the next guy. You lie back on the sand now, letting the ocean lull you with its rhythmic hush. Your fingers trace shapes in the soft grit. Circles, islands, coastlines. It's almost meditative. And then you remember something else. Modern map makers still intentionally insert fake places on maps. They call them trap streets or paper towns like Agloe, New York, a made-up location designed to catch copyright thieves. So, in a way, Bermea was ahead of its time. A maritime intellectual property stunt, or perhaps just very shy. A gentle breeze stirs, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. You breathe deeply. It smells of mystery and mild mischief. Far offshore, a buoy clangs softly like it is telling you a bedtime story. As dusk spreads its lavender hush across the sky, you imagine yourself adrift at sea, compass spinning. With a map that insists you almost there, almost to an island that will never show up. You smile, because that's geography's odd charm. It's full of places we thought were real, and real places we still don't fully understand. The sound of the ocean slowly fades as you wander inland again, this time toward a landscape so vast and white it seems to go on forever. Like someone forgot to finish painting the earth. Welcome to the salt flats, where silence reigns, horizons bend, and your reflection might just float in the sky. Tonight, you're gliding across Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni, the largest salt flat on the planet. At over 10,000 square kilometers, it's not just a quirky footnote in a travel brochure. It's a glittering, geometric expanse left behind by a prehistoric lake that dried up like a spilled drink in the sun. You step onto the crusty white surface, and it crunches faintly under your feet. The air is bone dry. Your shadow feels sharp-edged. There's no echo, no birds, no breeze, just you, salt, and sky. It's like walking on a frozen ocean of sugar cubes. Now, imagine this place used to be underwater. A massive, ancient body called Lake Minkin. Thousands of years ago, it covered this whole area with waves and fish and everything. But the lake gradually disappeared, thanks to tectonic shifts, and a climate that decided, nah, we're going for crisp, dry minimalism now. Historians still argue whether the drying process was entirely natural or sped up by human activity at some unknown point. But what's left is breathtaking, a blinding white plain so flat it's used to calibrate satellites. That's right, your phone. GPS might owe its accuracy to this sleepy corner of South America. The fun part. After a light rain, Salar de Uyuni becomes a giant mirror. A shallow layer of water covers the salt, and suddenly the clouds, stars, and moon stretch out beneath your feet, you re-standing on infinity. People take surreal selfies here, walking into the heavens, their feet vanishing into reflection. But let's dial it back to the slightly more boring and sleep-friendly realities. The ground you're walking on is not just salt. Beneath it lies one of the largest lithium reserves on Earth. That's the stuff your phone battery probably uses. This serene, dreamlike landscape is also a geopolitical goldmine. Governments and tech companies eye it like a slow-cooked buffet. And yet, standing here now, there's none of that. Just a crunch, a slow walk. Maybe a llama in the distance, pretending not to care about geopolitics. The air has a faint metallic scent, clean and sterile. Somewhere along the flat expanse, you find a small rock pile, some kind traveler's monument to nowhere. You add a pebble, just because. You sit. The salt is warm under your hands. Light bounces in every direction, making the sky feel 3 times bigger. You squint. Your eyelashes sparkle with microscopic crystals. You are, briefly, a salt-covered space traveler. Nearby, there's a hotel made entirely of salt bricks. Yes, you can sleep in a salt room here. On a salt bed, at a salt table. It's oddly cozy. No, you dainty get fries with that. In local folklore, the flats are sacred. The Aymara people believe they were formed from the tears of a giantess goddess, mourning her lost lover. Her grief crystallized into this land of endless white. You lie down on the firm surface, the salt pressing gently into your back. You can almost hear the earth sighing underneath. It feels like you re-floating on water, on time, on memory. The sky begins to darken, turning a deeper blue with each breath you take. Stars begin to prick the horizon. And here's the thing, because Salar de Uyuni is so flat and clear. You'll see some of the best stargazing on Earth. The Milky Way drapes itself overhead like a soft wool blanket, gently tucking you in. Somewhere, way off in the distance, a tour van hums quietly. Its passengers shuffle out and gasp at the reflection of Jupiter beneath their feet. But from where you are, there's just stillness. You lick your lips. Yep, they taste like salt now. This place is quiet but never truly empty. GPS engineers, desert foxes, lithium miners, stargazers, and dreaming travelers all pass through here. And now, you're among them. You breathe in and out, slowly, deeply. The ground is a mirror, the sky a painting, and you You read just a sleepy explorer walking across the world's flattest lullaby. You blink, and the stars from the salt flat gently dissolve, giving way to a new landscape. The terrain shifts beneath your feet, softening, rising, tilting, and suddenly, you find yourself strolling through the Carpathian Mountains. Not the Alps, not the Rockies. These are the other mountains, quiet, misty, forested, and deeply overlooked. They stretch across Eastern Europe like a crooked spine, touching parts of Romania, Slovakia, Ukraine, and a few other places that rarely make your vacation shortlist. But tonight, that's where you are. In a region where moss covers everything like a fuzzy green blanket, and the trees whisper stories older than most empires. The ground is damp, the air smells of pine and mushrooms, and somewhere in the distance, a bell rings slowly, just once. You didn't imagine it. Maybe a shepherd's flock is being rounded up for the night. Maybe someone is calling home a very confused goat. The Carpathians are strange in the best way. This range isn't just scenic, it's Smith's oat. You tread carefully, half expecting to bump into a brooding count in a cape. Yes, Transylvania lies in the heart of these mountains, and while Dracula isn't waiting around the corner with a glass of Chianti, the region really does boast hundreds of castle ruins, many tucked deep in fog-draped hills. You pass by one now, stone arches collapsed into themselves, vines braiding through crumbled watchtowers. Geographers might tell you this area is known for its karst formations, weirdly eroded limestone hills, caves, and sinkholes that make hiking feel like wandering across a tilted chessboard. You spot one of those sinkholes now, yawning gently, as if bored with its own mystery. But what makes this geography so deliciously dull and oddly calming is how it resists fame. Unlike the jagged drama of the Alps, the Carpathians are lower, sleepier. The highest peak barely clears 2,600 meters. It's the kind of mountain that seems to shrug and say, meh, take a nap. Historians still argue whether the region acted as a major cultural barrier between East and West, or more like a corridor, where nomadic tribes and early kingdoms filtered through like tea leaves in boiling water. Either way, these slopes have seen a lot. Migrating Huns, Ottoman scouts, shepherds arguing about cheese. Speaking of cheese, yes, you pass a small wooden cabin with curls of smoke rising lazily from the chimney. Inside, wheels of sheep cheese ferment in the dark like edible moons. The Carpathians are known for this. It smells assertive, but oddly homey. You take a seat on a mossy boulder and look around. Fungi decorate fallen logs like sleepy shadows. An owl hoots once, as if to say, hey, I am narrating here. And you remember that this forest is also home to one of the densest brown bear populations in Europe. But don't worry, they're off doing bear things, like snoring in caves or judging tourists. At your feet, a trail winds down into a valley, past a stream so still it reflects the moon perfectly. You walk beside it, kicking up fallen leaves. There's no cell service here, no buzz of cities, just the occasional rustle of something in the underbrush, probably just a rabbit, and your own breath syncing with the slow rhythm of the land. You pass by a wooden sign in a language you can read. It creaks on its post, probably spelling out something like, "Please don't feed the spirits." Because yes, local folklore is packed with forest ghosts, whispering trees, and rivers that remember your name. All of which sound scarier than they feel. Tonight, everything feels soft, safe, tucked in. You reach a clearing and look back. The mountains roll gently into the distance, each ridge layered behind the next like folds in a sleeping giant's blanket. These aren't the showy kind of mountains. The kind you slowly fall in love with. The kind that always look slightly out of focus, like they belong in a watercolor painting or a dream. Somewhere up the slope, a deer watches you. You wave, it doesn't. Wave back, rude but fair. And for a moment, you forget where you started. Salt flats, deserts. Was that just a few minutes ago, or a century? Geography has its own way of messing with time, especially in places like this, where the land feels older than any calendar. You close your eyes for a second. The air wraps around you like a blanket stitched from pine needles, goat bells, and half-remembered myths. And though the Carpathians have never tried to impress anyone, tonight they've gently stolen the show. As the misty Carpathians fade behind you like a dissolving watercolor, the ground begins to firm beneath your feet. And the scent in the air changes warmer now, dry, a hint of salt and sun-baked stone. You re-walking along a coast now, but not one with umbrellas or fruity drinks. This is the ancient, oddly tidy coastline of Oman, one of the lesser hyped but geographically mesmerizing edges of the Arabian Peninsula. You stroll along a cliff path above the Strait of Hormuz, where the sea glitters like a mirror left out in the desert. Down below, the water moves slowly, pushed by currents that have directed the fates of empires. The strait may be fraught today, but it's also geographically weird. A narrow neck where the Persian Gulf squeezes into the Arabian Sea, like toothpaste refusing to leave the tube too fast. Geologists still argue whether this bottleneck once split into multiple smaller islands, or if it has always been this slender. But regardless, it has always made for complicated sailing, both physically and diplomatically. Tonight, though, you're not worrying about oil tankers or regional politics. You're re-admiring the way the moonlight makes the waves look like sheets of silver being ironed in slow motion. You step carefully. This is karst country, again. But unlike the mossy mystery of the Carpathians, Oman's version is all jagged limestone. Ridges honeycombed with caves that stretch for miles underground. One of them, the Majlis al-Jinn, is among the world's largest underground chambers. You don't go in it, closed at night, probably full of sleeping bats and bored spirits, but you can feel it below your feet, an entire other world, just under there. You pass a modest fishing village. A few boats bob lazily in the cove. Their hulls painted bright turquoise, chipped from salt and sun. Somewhere a goat bleats, as if annoyed that you've age-disturbed its nap schedule. You apologize silently and keep walking. Oman is full of these sleepy contradictions. Desert, mountain, and sea, all within a day's camel ride. Its Hajar Mountains look like someone left a pile of rusted iron out to oxidize for a few centuries. Stark, layered, geologically dramatic, but again, oddly relaxing when viewed from afar. You sip imaginary coffee from a tiny brass cup and take in the view. Not bad for a place most people can find on a map. You reach the rim of a canyon. But not just any canyon. This is the Grand Canyon of Arabia, Wadi Gul. It drops over 1,000 meters straight down. Carved by water that no longer flows. You peek over the edge and mutter, "Nope," before stepping back politely. Heights aren't for everyone, especially when they feel like they retilting slightly in your peripheral vision. Historians still debate how much ancient maritime trade flowed directly through Oman versus bypassing it in favor of flashier ports further north. But archaeological finds like frankincense, caravan trails, and boat-building tools suggest Oman was never just an observer. It was a quiet player in a loud region. You kick a rock. It skitters down the path and disappears into the dry wind. The wind whistles through date palms that line the edge of a falai, a traditional Omani irrigation canal that looks like someone built a miniature aqueduct for ants. The Philae system is UNESCO recognized, centuries old, and still waters farms today. You trail your fingers along the edge. The water is cool, impossibly clear, and moving with the confidence of something that has done this for 1,000 years. A local legend whispers into your ear something about jinn living in the mountains, hiding gold, or misguiding travelers. You smile, not because you believe it, but because it is the kind of story geography makes possible. You, Dante, get trickster spirits in plain suburbs. The sun has fully set now, but it's still warm. The kind of warmth that clings to rock and slowly releases through the night like the sigh of an old storyteller. You hear crickets. Or possibly just very bored geckos tapping out Morse code. Either way, you re not alone, but you re not being bothered. You lie back on a smooth boulder and look at the stars. The night sky in Oman is famously clear, and you can see the Milky Way streaking overhead like a spilled bottle of glitter. A shooting star passes. You make a wish, not for success, or money, or even sleep, just that this feeling of quiet curiosity and dry, dreamy calm could stretch a little longer. Your feet now crunch over dry earth as you drift further east, where coastlines start to melt into sprawling deltas and broad rivers carving up land like butter. Welcome to the braided veins of Bangladesh, a place so defined by geography that it's almost entirely made of water and motion. You find yourself standing ankle-deep in silt at the edge of the Ganges Delta, the largest river delta on Earth. It doesn't tease so much end the rivers as it absorbs them into itself, a watery spiderweb, where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers weave together in a slow, unstoppable sprawl. The land is soft under your feet, thick with nutrients, thick with stories. It asks the kind of place where the land is never quite the same 2 years in a row. Rivers shift course, sometimes abruptly, eating up farmland and building new banks elsewhere. Like a moody sculptor with a short attention span, historians still argue whether this relentless reshaping helped or hindered ancient kingdoms in the region. One moment a trading hub, the next submerged rice paddies. You pause and stare at the horizon. It ripples, not because of heat, but because the entire land breathes with the pulse of the tides and monsoons. This is where geography fights back. You imagine living here, how people build homes on stilts, or even on rafts, ready to float away like wayward teacups. It's not about controlling nature here. It's about having tea with it and hoping it behaves. As you wander inland, the landscape is ruled by endless charlands, temporary islands made of river sediment. They look permanent, but they vanish. Some last a decade, others just a season. Entire communities live on them, raising goats, growing lentils, then moving when the island sighs and slips back into the river like it forgot to renew its lease. You pass through a small village with houses made of woven bamboo. Children race past, their laughter blending with the distant splash of water buffalo. A woman washes dishes in a tin basin, humming something wordless. It is all so beautifully ordinary and in constant danger of erasure. Even now, scientists can't agree on how long Bangladesh will remain above sea level if climate trends continue. But tonight, everything is calm. Tonight, the moon reflects in dozens of narrow canals, like a mirror shattered and lovingly reassembled. The air is warm and thick, scented with wet earth and blooming night jasmine. You follow a path lined with banana trees, brushing giant leaves aside like curtains. A frog hops past your sandal. It pauses as if to check if you're friendly, then disappears into the underbrush with a sound like a bubble popping. Suddenly, in the Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove forest and home to the legendary and legendarily grumpy Royal Bengal tiger. But don't worry. You won't meet one, not tonight. They deep in the jungle, sleeping or possibly rehearsing new ways to confuse camera traps. You, on the other hand, are walking a raised wooden path. Your footsteps softened by moss, and the occasional crab skittering for cover. You spot a mudskipper, those fish that pretend to be amphibians for fun. It blinks at you. You blink back. An understanding is reached. There's something oddly peaceful about mangroves. Their tangled roots rise above the water, like fingers trying to hold everything together. And in a place where land and water constantly argue, mangroves are the quiet referees, absorbing storm surges, reducing erosion, and generally minding their own business. Your lantern casts flickering light on a small shrine by the path. It's Spore, Bon Bibi, a forest guardian spirit who protects humans from tigers. If you're respectful, you nod to her statue, just in case. A breeze rises, cool and sticky. You hear distant thunder, not from a storm, but from ice breaking in the Himalayas, hundreds of miles away. That ice will melt into rivers, rivers into deltas, deltas into memories. Geography isn't static here. It's a time lapse in slow motion. And still, people endure. As you finally sit on a stone ledge overlooking a moonlit channel, a fishing boat drifts by, its lantern swinging gently like a sleepy eye. You wave. No one waves back, but you weren't really expecting them to. This isn't that kind of journey. The night deepens. The frogs grow louder. The stars peek between clouds with quiet curiosity. You feel like a single grain of silt moving slowly with the current, reshaping the world one whisper at a time. The air changes again, lighter now, cooler laced with the faint scent of pine and iron-rich dust. You've left the watery tangle of Bangladesh behind and begun your slow climb into a far more arid, ancient landscape, the Atlas Mountains of North Africa. You're not entirely sure when the desert gave way to these stoic ridges. One moment it was endless beige horizon, and the next wrinkled stone ridgelines, rising like sleeping dragons. Welcome to the land where continents once collided, and still kind of do. The Atlas Mountains, stretching across Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, are a geological patchwork of folded crust, born from the African and Eurasian plates, butting heads, long before tea was invented. You trudge up a gentle slope, the kind where every loose pebble seems committed to escaping under your foot. The rocks here tell stories if you had 50 million years and a very patient translator. Pale fossils peek out of the ground, trilobites, ammonites, the occasional fish that once swam in oceans that no longer exist. Historians still argue whether ancient Berber cultures intentionally settled along these fossil-rich veins for symbolic reasons, or if it was just nice real estate with a view. In the thin mountain air, everything feels clearer. Stars jab at the sky like punctuation marks. You pull your coat a little tighter. A goat bleats nearby, sounding extremely unimpressed by your hiking pace. You reach a Tubkal village, where the houses seem stapled directly onto the slope. Stone walls, wooden beams, blue-painted windows. Someone is baking bread underground, literally. You pass a tabuna oven, its mouth just peeking from the dirt, releasing little puffs of flour steam. A sleepy dog opens one eye at you, decides you're not a threat, and returns to dreaming of slow-moving sheep. Here, in the Atlas, time doesn't flow, it echoes. The villagers feel half forgotten, but not abandoned. It's geography that isolates them, not indifference. You recall reading that during winter, some hamlets are snowed in for months. No roads, just snowshoes, determination, and a staggering amount of lentils. As you follow a path etched into the rock by generations of footfalls, you pass over a natural bridge, limestone, warped by wind and water. Beneath you, a ravine slices through the mountains like a lazy sword wound. In the distance, a fortified home clings to a cliffside, its reddish walls camouflaged in twilight. You imagine trying to build anything on that kind of slope and shudder. Geography defines more than where people live here, it shapes how they live. The Berber tribes have mapped their entire lives around the land. Seasonal transhumance, the herding of animals from lowland pastures to highland grazing still happens today, like a rhythmic migration. And you, somehow, feel like part of that rhythm now. By morning, this place will be all motion again. Traders with mules, children running barefoot on cobbles, grandmothers bargaining at market for the freshest apricots. But tonight, only the wind speaks. A little farther, you stumble upon a prehistoric petroglyph site, etchings of antelope, hunters, spirals carved into a rock wall that has been exposed to the stars for 5,000 years. Nobody knows for sure what they mean. Maybe hunting records, maybe art, or maybe just someone's way of saying, "Hey, I was here. Dante, forget me." You run your fingers over the smooth depressions and whisper something you hope they appreciate. You settle on a warm patch of stone under a juniper tree and exhale. In the valley below, faint lanterns flicker in a caravanserai, an ancient rest stop for travelers. You half expect a silk trader to wander up the trail and offer you dried dates. And camel gossip, far away, the desert murmurs. Sand is always thinking about moving, even when it airs still. It plans in whispers and shifts in silence. As you close your eyes, the geography of North Africa seems to hum a low lullaby. The mountains, the valleys, the dust, all of it shaped by time and tectonics. Yes, but also by stubbornness, resilience, and the occasional goat with excellent climbing skills. You descend gently from the Atlas heights, knees grateful for the reprieve, only to find yourself wandering into a land that feels unfinished, sparse, like a painter left their canvas half blank. This is the Danakil Depression, a place geographers sometimes whisper about with the kind of reverence normally reserved for volcanoes and cheese that bites back. You're now in northeastern Ethiopia, standing in one of the hottest, driest, and lowest inhabited places on Earth. And somehow, people live here. Not just live, thrive, in their own parched, salt-crusted way. It feels like you've walked onto a different planet. The ground beneath you is cracked salt flats, so blindingly white they seem to hum in the moonlight. You walk slowly, partly to take it all in, partly because it feels like the earth might crumble if you step too hard. You pass by a sulfur spring, bubbling like it's been cursed by an ancient god in a bad mood. The air smells like overcooked eggs and stings your nose a little. Pools of neon yellow and acid green spread like paint spilled in divine frustration. It's quietly beautiful and aggressively unfriendly. And yet, here comes someone barefoot, leading camels loaded with salt bricks. The Afar people, whose ancestors have lived here for centuries, still mine salt by hand. They call it white gold. You wave, the man nods once. It's the kind of nod that says, yes, this place is ridiculous. But it's mine. You notice a volcano, smoldering in the distance, Erta Ale, one of the few lava lakes on the planet that stays persistently active. It glows red like a fireplace in the Earth's belly. Historians still argue whether ancient legends of gates to hell in this region referred to this literal fiery hole, or simply to the general vibe of existing here in July. The heat is strange. It's not a slap, it is a slow press, like a cat settling on your chest. Yet, at night, it is surprisingly cold. You shiver, realizing this desert docent too predictable. To your left, a phantom lake shimmers, a perfect illusion. The mirage dances just out of reach, a trick of the eyes and the heat. You know it isn't real, and yet your brain wants to run toward it, and cannonball in geography here is less about where things are, and more about what you believe you're re-seeing. Not far from your path, you spot a few stone circles, carefully arranged markers. Possibly ancient graves, possibly just someone trying to pass the time. No inscriptions, just silent sentinels of who knows what. Scholars debate whether humans used this region for seasonal rituals or just really regretted passing through. You step lightly on the ground, remembering that beneath this crust, the earth is alive, plates pulling apart, magma murmuring, gases burping up through vents. It's a place where the world doesn't pretend to be stable. You meet a group of far salt traders resting beneath a tattered cloth tent. One offers you a small cup of Buna Ethiopian coffee brewed thick and sweet, like molasses with ambition. You sip and smile. It doesn't make the landscape friendlier, but it does make it feel less lonely. The camels grunt, shifting their burdens. You watch as they move off again, single file, carving faint lines across the salt like punctuation marks on a chalkboard. In this place, humans and geography write on each other. You press onward, feet crunching on salt, past geysers that hiss softly in the dark. The Danakil doesn't really sleep, it just waits. At a shallow crater rim, you glance down into a world of fire and vapor. It's hypnotic. You imagine early travelers seeing this glow from miles away, unsure whether they were being called or warned. Then, unexpectedly, a breeze. Cool, kind, carrying the scent of nothing in particular, just air that's had a long journey. You exhale. The tension in your shoulders finally, slowly, unwinds. Your path flattens, salt turning to black basalt, then to sand again. You leave the Danakil not by road, but by feel, as if it gently releases you after a polite stay. No fanfare, no signs, just a slowly shifting ground beneath your feet, whispering, "Come back when you're saltier." The wind shifts again, and you now find yourself walking into a land drawn with rivers instead of borders. Welcome to the Amazon basin, where geography doesn't politely pause to ask for permission. It floods, coils, pulses, and hums. You re-standing inside the largest drainage system on Earth, and everything around you seems to breathe, including the ground. Your boots squelch gently in mossy mud. Everything is green, but not one kind of green. Hundreds. Greens with personalities. Envy green, lizard green. I wouldn't touch that green. Even the air is thick with green, a humid soup that makes you wonder if you accidentally inhaled a small frog. You climb onto a narrow wooden canoe, not because you're skilled, but because that's how one must travel here. The boatman doesn't speak much. He just nods toward the winding brown water and pushes off, letting the Amazon River do the rest. The river is wide, unreasonably wide. It sometimes spans over 24 miles across during the rainy season, turning entire towns into temporary islands. Historians still argue whether early explorers who claimed it as impassable were exaggerating or just underestimating how rude the jungle can be. You drift past trees standing knee-deep in water. They're called Varzea floodplain forests. That treat annual floods like old friends dropping by for lunch. One tree has vines that slither like lazy snakes, another hums faintly with bees the size of your thumb. Somewhere nearby, a sloth blinks once, maybe twice. That's the entire plot of It's Afternoon. You wave. It doesn't. He waved back, rude. The boatman points up, you squint. Nestled in the canopy is a stilted house, seemingly built on a dare. A family waves down to you children in loose cotton, a woman balancing a pot. They live with the river, not near it. When it rises, they float. When it falls, they walk. You ask, softly, how people navigate here. The boatman simply says, the river tells you. Apparently, that's enough. You glide through a narrow channel, water barely disturbed. The silence is deep, occasionally interrupted by a chorus of frogs who've mistaken dusk for Broadway. You spot a pink river dolphin, its smooth back arcing just above the surface. Yes, they re-real. Yes, they re-pink. No, scientists still don't fully agree why. Some say it's capillary flushing, others say it's just a flex. You dock at a floating village, homes tethered like balloons, bobbing gently with the current. Children paddle by on hollowed-out logs. One throws you a mango. You nearly fall in catching it. The juice is sweet, almost floral. For a moment, the entire Amazon seems to wink as you sit on a bamboo step, watching the sky turn gold and copper. A man tells you the story of the Encantado, a shape-shifting dolphin spirit said to lure people underwater with music and charm. You laugh. He doesn't. Apparently, many still leave offerings, just in case. There's something humbling about this place. Geography, isn't. A backdrop, it's the script, the stage, the director. The river changes direction multiple times a day in some parts. Nudged by tidal pushes from the Atlantic Ocean over 1,000 miles away. It's the only major river with a tidal bore, a phenomenon where ocean waves ride upstream, flipping the river's flow like a stubborn pancake. Think about how early cartographers tried to map this place. Brave, clueless souls scratching lines onto paper, while jaguars watched silently from the foliage. Some even invented tributaries when they got tired or bitten. Entire fake rivers persisted on maps for decades. You spend the night in a thatched shelter, rocking slightly as the water shifts below. Crickets chirp in 7/4 time. A monkey howls once, then decides that was enough work for the day. Later, you dream of floating. You dream of currents that carry not just boats, but thoughts. Somewhere, the forest murmurs something in a language older than maps. In the morning, the boatman is ready again. No good morning, just a nod. You step into the canoe. He turns without asking and begins paddling north, because here, north is simply the direction the river feels like today. You're still drifting, but now the scene shifts again, slower, drier, quieter. You in the Sahara Desert, yet not the part you've seen in travel brochures. No sandboarding, no camel safaris, no influencers posing with flowing scarves. Instead, you're in one of the loneliest parts of northern Niger, staring at an ancient, half-buried trade route known only to a few. The sun is a giant egg yolk overhead. You squint beneath your headscarf, fashioned hastily from a towel and good intentions, and everything seems to shimmer in waves. Dunes rise and fall like frozen ocean swells. You've lost all concept of distance, because here, far and near play tricks. You walk beside a guide named Amadou, who tells you this route was once part of the Trans-Saharan trade network, used for centuries to move salt, gold, ivory, and ideas across thousands of miles. He says it with the practiced calm of someone who's memorized distances in camel days. Historians still argue whether these paths were consistently used year-round, or whether they flickered in and out like campfire smoke based on seasonal whims. You ask how they navigated. Amadou points to the stars. And shadows, he adds, and bones. You try not to ask more about that last one. The wind kicks up, and you pass what looks like a line of rocks. Amadou says it's a stone caravan marker, probably 800 years old. Someone, long before GPS or Google Earth, lined up stones for strangers they would never meet. It's oddly heartwarming. Far in the distance, a hill appears. It's not natural. You approach to find the crumbling remains of an oasis town, mostly swallowed by sand. There's the husk of a well, a few low walls, and surprisingly a carved doorway, still standing, defiant against time. You run your hand along the stone. It's warm, but oddly smooth, like it's been touched by generations who once waited here for water, for shade, or for their place in the world to arrive on a camel-s back. You sit for a while. It's quiet, not peaceful forest quiet, but pressure in your quiet. You start hearing your own heartbeat in stereo. Somewhere in the stillness, you notice small tufts of vegetation, desert grasses, that sleep for decades and spring to life after a single rain. You wonder what else is hiding beneath the sand, just waiting for the right moment. Amadou pulls out a gourd and offers you water. It's warm and earthy, but you drink anyway. Hydration is less of a luxury and more of a commandment here. He tells you about the Azele, an annual salt caravan that still travels from Taoudani in Mali to Timbuktu. Hundreds of camels, weeks of walking. Each man carries not just salt, but legacy. Even now, Amadou says, they don't use compasses, only stars, dunes, and memory. You ask why not modern tools? He shrugs. Because tradition still works. As the sun begins its slow descent, shadows stretch long across the dunes. The sky shifts from bleached yellow to dusty mauve. You begin walking again, careful to follow in Amadou's footsteps. At one point, he stops and smiles. You're re-walking the old maps. Now, he says, you realize he means literal ones, the ones drawn centuries ago, with dragons around the edges and blank spaces labeled "Here be sand." The ones modern geographers laugh at, but secretly love. The ones that still had room for imagination. In the distance, you see a mirage, a perfect little lake, surrounded by palm trees. You know it fake, and yet your body wants to believe. Just for a second, it feels real. The desert joke, it teaches you to doubt your own eyes, and then gives you no choice but to trust your feet instead. Later, you stop at a real oasis, tucked into a rock formation like a hidden gem. There's water, cold, dark, life-saving. A goat bleats somewhere, probably unimpressed by your stumbling. A date palm offers a few sun-warmed fruits. You chew slowly. They taste like brown sugar mixed with sunlight. You lie back on a woven mat, the stars already starting to pierce through the dusk. Amadou is humming something low and repetitive. You don't recognize the tune, but it fits. The desert doesn't need to be loud. Its geography, ISN, T-sharp, or dramatic. It's just constant, immense, absurdly patient. You close your eyes and feel the temperature drop more than 30 degrees in just an hour. Everything in the desert shifts twice a day. Heat to cold, light to dark, real to unreal. You wonder how many feet have walked this same stretch of sand before you. Traders, nomads, soldiers, poets, probably someone with equally bad shoes. The desert has no memory, but it doesn't forget either. You drift to sleep under stars that look close enough to pluck. There is no ceiling here, only space and silence. You wake, if you can call it that, beneath a sheet of stars so bright they feel backlit by intention. The Milky Way arcs above like a cosmic river, and for a groggy moment you're convinced you're lying on the underside of the universe itself. The fire has burned low. Amadou is already up, making a pot of something that smells suspiciously like tea and roasted socks. You drink it anyway. It's not bad. Today, you heading west, skirting the edge of a region that hasn't always agreed with its own geography, the Sahel. This strip, stretching from Senegal to Sudan, isn't quite desert, but definitely not lush. It's the in-between, a savanna limbo, and it shifts, slowly, steadily, sometimes tragically. The Sahara creeps southward, swallowing farmland and forcing communities to chase their own water. You walk beside a dry wadi, a riverbed that only flows once or twice a year. You wouldn't believe it unless someone told you, and even then, the idea of a rushing river here feels like a prank. But locals remember. Some say that when the floods come, they sound like drums. Historians still debate whether seasonal migrations here are a modern crisis or a thousand-year tradition simply resurfacing. Along the path, you pass ruins of mud brick, settlements abandoned for decades, maybe centuries. Some buildings are still intact, their corners rounded like melted candles. You run your fingers along the walls, wondering who lived here. What did they fear? What did they pray for when the rains didn't come? A child's sandal, long outgrown, lies half buried in dust. You leave it untouched. It's a breadcrumb from a life that geography quietly erased. You move through a borderland, but there's no sign, no line, no checkpoint. 1 minute you in Niger, the next in Mali. Borders here are conceptual, negotiated in colonial backrooms, a century ago by men who'd never seen a baobab tree. The people who live here, Tuareg, Fulani, Hausa, see the land as something woven, not divided. Amadou tells you of an ancient rock art site, and soon you there staring at prehistoric carvings of giraffes, elephants, even crocodiles. Animals that no longer exist here. It's a reminder that the desert was once a garden, and humans have been adapting to its changes far longer than any climate summit has lasted. You reach a market town that isn't really a town at all, just a cluster of tents and wooden stalls popping up once a week when nomads and traders converge. Here, GPS doesn't matter. The rhythm is in stories, trade, and memory. A man sells salt, bricks stacked like Jenga towers. A woman grinds millet with a rhythm that could hypnotize you if you watched too long. You buy a carved wooden spoon. Why? You don't know. Maybe to feel like you belong. Or maybe because it fits in your hand in a way that feels earned. Later, you rest beneath a baobab tree. Its trunk fat like it's been storing secrets instead of water. They say baobabs can live for thousands of years. One in Senegal is rumored to have swallowed a postbox. Another in Madagascar was used as a prison. You close your eyes and imagine its roots running deeper than politics, deeper than memory. From the shade, you listen to Amadou speak about the Great Green Wall, a massive effort to plant trees across the Sahel to stop desertification, a green scar across a drying land. It's part hope, part science, part prayer. Scientists are still debating how effective it is, but the people planting those saplings, they're not waiting for consensus. You walk on the soil, changes color, dusty orange, becomes something paler, like ash. You cross a region where, centuries ago, empires rose from river valleys that now host little more than goats. Once, This was home to scholars and libraries, Timbuktu, not as myth, but as intellectual capital. Students would walk for weeks to read Arabic manuscripts on astronomy and law. Now, some of those manuscripts are buried in tin trunks, protected from dust, fire, and thieves. You stop in a village where walls are made of clay and stories. A man invites you to sit. He tells you how his grandfather once showed him a map, drawn entirely from memory, with no scale, no labels, but perfect sense. We don't draw what we don't need, he says, and we don't need what we already know. You nod like you understand, but really you're just admiring the wisdom. By evening, the wind picks up sand, stings your cheeks. The harmattan is arriving, a dry wind that blows down from the desert, carrying dust from thousands of miles away. It creeps through everything, even your thoughts. You wrap your scarf tighter and huddle beneath a tarp, sipping more of that questionable tea. That night, sleep comes differently. It doesn't descend like a curtain, it seeps in like fog. You feel the contours of the land still pulsing beneath you, dunes rising, rivers whispering, winds remembering routes your feet barely managed to follow. You dream of animals that no longer live here, of empires without maps, of trees that walk, and somewhere in that dream, a distant drumbeat. Maybe it's thunder, or maybe the wadi is finally remembering how to be a river again. You reawake, but barely. The kind of wakefulness that drifts like smoke from a campfire, thin, flickering, and only half real. Your eyes open to a haze of dust in the rising sun, warm light sifting through the cloth walls of your tent. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays in protest at the existence of morning. You can relate. Today, your journey brings you to a geographic marvel, one that maps still struggle to represent: the Niger River's inland delta. Yes, a delta in the middle of landlocked Mali seems impossible until you see it. A vast lattice of floodplains, marshes, and channels that swells and shrinks with the seasons like a living lung. From above, it looks like veins on a giant leaf. On foot, it feels like a maze, dreamt up by a particularly indecisive river. You board a pirogue, a narrow wooden boat that seems allergic to stability. The boatman, with a face carved by sun and patience, poles you gently through the reeds. Birds scatter ibis, storks, and the occasional grumpy heron that clearly skipped breakfast. The water is calm, but always moving. The delta doesn't flow like a river. It murmurs like a secret. Villages float into view, literal floating villages, their homes built on stilts or barges that rise with the floods. Some even move their houses seasonally, like nomads of the water. You pass Mopti, sometimes called the Venice of the South, though nobody here has gondolas, and the fish market smells far too honest. A woman in a canoe glides past, balancing 3 buckets, a baby, and somehow a chicken. You nod in admiration. She nods back, as if to say, yes, it's hard. No, I won. Drop anything. And yes, I am judging your posture. Historians still argue whether the delta was once part of a much larger lake system, one that shrank over centuries, leaving this fluid puzzle behind. What's certain is that this place feeds more than just bodies. It nourishes memories, culture, economies, and occasionally, your socks. If you're not careful stepping out, you arrive in Djenné, where geography and architecture collide in a dusty crescendo. The Great Mosque of Djenné, the largest mud brick building in the world, rises like a sandcastle built by ancient giants. It's rebuilt each year by hand, an entire town ritual involving thousands of people slapping wet clay onto the walls while singing. Geography didn't just influence this design, it demanded it. Concrete would crack. Stone would sink. Only mud breathes with the land. You sleep that night in a guest house with no ceiling fan. Only the quiet roar of frogs in the distance and the creak of your own thoughts. The wind sighs through open windows. It smells like water, silt, and time. The next morning, your feet hit the road again. Geography, it turns out, doesn't stop. Neither do you. You move south now, passing through transition zones where desert gives way to grasslands, and grasslands slowly flirt with tropical forest. The change is subtle at first. A few more trees, a bit more shade, then, suddenly, the air shifts. Moisture returns. Colors deepen. You feel it in your lungs. Here, villages are rounder, softer. Roofs are thatch. Walls are painted with patterns that tell tribal stories passed down not in books, but brushed. In one courtyard, an old woman draws maps in the dirt with a stick. They aren't apolitical. They re-seasonal maps showing flood routes, grazing paths, fruit timings. You ask if you can take a photo. She chuckles, then wipes the map away with her foot. Further on, you encounter a sacred grove. Trees so old they have names, roles, and rumored opinions. Locals leave offerings at their roots. Cowrie shells, carved stones, tiny dolls made from leaves. The air here is thicker, quieter. Even birds, Dante interrupt. You, Dante, ask questions. You just sit and breathe. Eventually, reluctantly, you reach the final stop. A regional capital humming with motorcycles, market stalls, and the low din of modern life. People hustle, phones ring, generators buzz. But in one cafe tucked away between a tailor's shop and a mosque, you sip cool hibiscus tea and reflect. Geography, you realize, isn't just land. It's motion. It's tension. It's memory made terrain. It's the river that bends but never breaks. The dune that shifts but never vanishes. The mountain that waits, whether anyone climbs it or not. And it's you, walking, floating, climbing, listening, charting a map, not on paper, but in memory, breath by breath. The fire is out now, its last embers whispering into the soil. Above you, the stars shift ever so slightly, wheeling across the sky in slow, silent certainty. You lie back. The ground is still warm beneath your shoulders. A distant breeze hums across the plain, soft, insistent, like the earth breathing in its sleep. Everything you've seen, the wandering rivers, the borderless deserts, the whispering forests, folds itself gently into the fabric of night. Places blur into one another. Footsteps become echoes. Stories become silence. Your body loosens, lengthens. The rhythm of the day fades into the hush between thoughts. There is no destination now, just stillness. Let it hold you, let it lull you. You've gone far enough. Sleep is here.